Hello everyone, today we are going to be doing a deck tech for Zhulodok Void Gorger. We're going to call him Zhul. Zhul is a 6 mana legendary eldrazi 7/4, and he says colorless spells you cast from your hand with mana value 7 or greater have cascade. We all know what cascade does, so let's just start. Disclaimer, this deck list was made prior to knowing what the precon has in it, so prices will be inaccurate on some cards if reprinted, and will exclude cards like the new cards from the precon just because I don't know what they are, they're just not out yet. Anyways, vulnerabilities. Our commander is a big part of our deck. Him dying and being countered because he costs 6 mana is really going to hurt us. So that's where he takes a big hit. Colorless also has very limited options. There's not great options for like removal, or like there's only like mana rocks for ramp, or there's not a lot of card draw. So we kind of don't have a ton of options. Artifact destruction makes us cry just because we need a lot of artifacts to give us mana to be able to cast our big spells as soon as possible. And aggro really hurts us just because we have such a slow start. Like, we're probably not playing a creature until about turn 4 or 5 anyways, so that can really hurt us. Here's the game plan. We need Zhul to win. Just straight up, his impact is too big like on the deck. We just want him to cascade off of our big spells. So we want to early game play mana rocks. Once we have enough, like for 6, play Zhul, and then next turn, or assuming like we can give him protection ideally, the next turn we want to cast a 7+ spell to cascade twice into big scary value. That's really how we're going to funnel out the deck, and then we're going to kill our opponents with big scary creatures. Planeswalkers, we got double Ugin. The one on the left, Ugin the Ineffable, is mainly there. He's honestly just really good all around, just because he says colorless spells cost 2 less, which is really good. And we can also just plus him to exile the top card of our library, make it a 2/2, and then when it leaves the battlefield, we just put it in our hand, so it's kind of like card draw. And then his minus just straight up removal for not colorless things. But we're mainly just using him because his cost reduction literally makes our entire deck cost 2 less, which is so good. And then big mana Ugin, he costs 8, which is a lot, but I mean, we're big mana, so it's not a crazy big deal. He's either going to bolt something, or he's going to minus X is really why we're using it. Minus X, probably minus 6, maybe 7 if we're in a pinch. Just to exile each permanent with basically 1 or more color, and since we're a colorless deck, it doesn't hit us. And then if we ult him, we'll just win the game. Like, if you're gaining 7, drawing 7, and then playing 7 for free, like, come on. Let's go to creatures. Ancient Stone Idol, I like the idea of, just because he has flash, and we can do it at instant speed when we have Zhul on the field. If someone attacks us, he's going to cost a lot less. And he's just like a 12/12 with trample, and then when he dies, he kind of replaces himself, which is really neat. Then we have Artisan of Kozilek. We're mainly running him because of the Annihilator, but also when he enters the battlefield, when we cast him rather, we can just return a creature card from our grave to the battlefield, so he's a little bit of good reanimation, but that Annihilator is the whole point of the Eldrazi. We have Bane of Bala Ged. Again, 7 mana, so that's important, so we can cascade off of it, but it basically has Annihilator too, except it exiles. Blightsteel, just because he's the big man himself. He's trample, infect, indestructible, and if he would really die, just shuffle him just right back into the grave. And he just one-shots people. Breaker of Armies, he's kind of like a nuke. That's the way I look at him. Like, he's a 10/8, so all creatures have to block him. So 1, he makes your other guys unblockable, and 2, he's probably going to kill a lot of guys. And we get to pick the order of the damage, though. We get to kill the problematic guys. Cityscape Leveler is really cool, just because it's an 8/8 with trample, and when it enters the battlefield, destroy up to 1 non-land permanent, and then it's, its controller makes a Power Stone token, but it's also when it attacks, so in a way, it kind of has like pseudo Annihilator. I don't know, I think it's kind of neat. Conduit of Ruin is a 6 mana 5/5. When we cast them, search our library for a colorless creature card with mana value 7 or greater, put it right on top. But the big important part is our first creature spell costs 2 less to cast every turn, which is super cool just because he tutors like whatever we want to the top, and then he makes everything else cheaper. Desolation Twin, just a 10 mana 10/10. Really 10 mana for 20 power is fine because he brings in a buddy. Emrakul the Promised End, 13 mana 13, but Emrakul's never going to cost 13 just because she has basically Delirium, but no one wants to say it. And then when we cast her, just gain control of target opponent during that player's next turn, and then they can take an extra turn after that. But like, it's a flying trample protection from instance. It's very hard to get rid of. And the fact that we get to control someone's next turn either can really like disrupt a lot of things, like we can destroy their board, or at the very worst, we just make whatever creature they have attack into Emrakul, and then we'll block and kill it. If that betrays, Annihilator 2, whenever an opponent sacrifices a non-token permanent, put that card onto the battlefield under your control, which is really cool because, you know, Annihilator makes them sack it, so you get whatever they sack. It's really neat. Joyrist Familiar, just historic spells cost 1 less to cast. That's why we're running it. Artifacts and legendary spells. We have a lot of artifacts. A lot of the big Eldrazi Titans are just legendary. So just having really any kind of cost reducer we can get is really important. And just in a vacuum, we play this turn 4, play a land drop turn 5, we cast our commander turn 5. That's still fine. Karn Legacy Reforged, he is a 5-mana star, but his power and toughness are equal to the greatest value among artifacts you control, so he's at least a 5/5. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, add Colorless for each artifact you control, and you can't use it to cast non-artifact spells. But he's like, we have a lot of big like artifacts like Blightsteel Colossus and like all the other stuff where having like all this extra mana, even just playing Mana Rocks, Joyrist Familiar, like whatever, just playing like more things for free, cost reducers, more mana for free, is still really good. And also he's a star, but he comes in as a 5/5. But again, if you have like a Blightsteel, he's now like a 10 or an 11/11, so he gets big. Kozilek, whenever we cast him, draw 4 cards, so that's really good. So even if he gets countered, we just draw 4 cards. And then he has Annihilator 4, so whenever we attack, defending player has to sacrifice 4 permanents, which is absolutely brutal, really for any deck. And then he has like the Eldrazi clause where it's like, oh, whenever he's put into a graveyard from anywhere, its owner shuffles his or her graveyard into his or her library. So Kozilek is nice, and you'll see Ulamog in a little bit. They're nice just because mill doesn't work on our deck too well, because we just shuffle it back up. Then we have the Great Distortion. He's a 12/12. Whenever we cast him, if we have fewer than 7 cards in our hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So he always just fills our hand. And then he's a menace, which is really annoying to deal with a 12/12 menace. And then we discard a card with mana cost X, counter target spell with converted mana cost X, which is nice. It's just like fun little action. If we want to like pitch a Mana Rock late game to counter a spell, that's still fine. Then we have Liberator. It's a legendary artifact creature Thopter, which is cool. The main reason we're running it is because it has flash, flying. You may cast colorless spells and artifact spells as though they had flash. That's kind of like the making our guys come out at instant speed. But also the added benefit of whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast that spell is greater than him, put a 1/1 counter on him, so he gets a little bit bigger. Meteor Golem, he's 7 mana, so he hits that Cascade. When he enters the battlefield, destroy target non-land permanent an opponent controls. Just short, sweet, to the point. Oblivion Sower is a real weird one. He's a 6 mana 5/8, which I think is a really weird power toughness. But when we cast him, target opponent exiles the top 4 cards of his or her library. Then you may put any number of land cards that player owns from exile onto the battlefield under your control. Now, most likely our opponents don't have lands in exile, but if he comes in, like, we could always just get like a couple lands on the top of their deck, like maybe 1 or 2 lands. They come in untapped, assuming the lands say they do. So it was like a little bit of weird ramp, and he's got a big body, so he's a good blocker. Ornithopter Paradise is just a mana dork. Again, we're a big mana deck. We just need all the rocks we can get. Palladium Mirror is a great rock because he just taps for 2. 3 mana 2/2 that taps for 2 really gets us going quicker. So then like literally on turn 4 we'll have like 6 mana. Pathraiser of Ulamog is nice. An 11 mana 9/9 with Annihilator 3, and he has Super Menace. Can't be blocked by 3 or more creatures. Just that Annihilator 3 is why we're running him. Platinum Empyrean, 8 mana 8/8. Your life total can't change. Just like we can't gain or lose life. We can't pay life, but we can't gain or lose life, which is really nice. We can still lose to commander damage. That's important, but our life total can't change. Solemn, 4 mana. Search a deck for a basic. We get a waste, a little bit of ramp, and then when he dies, draw a card. He's a good blocker. He's a good, when he enters the battlefield, just more ramp. Ulamog's Crusher, Annihilator 2, and he attacks each turn of Fable. And it doesn't really matter because if we have Annihilator, we kind of want him to attack each turn of Fable. Ulamog's Ceaseless Hunger is a really great Eldrazi. When you cast him, exile 2 permanents. Just exile 2 things permanently, and he's indestructible. And then whenever he attacks, defending player exiles the top 20 cards of their library. Like, come on. Like, you mill a 5th of their deck, and you get rid of 2 things, and he's indestructible. That's a good guy. Then we have other Ulamog. He is still a 10/10. Whenever you cast him, you only destroy 1 permanent. Not as good. But he's still indestructible, but he has Annihilator 4 and that little Eldrazi clause. And then our final creature is Void Winnower, is a 9 mana 11/9. Your opponents can't cast spells with even converted mana costs, and they can't block with even converted mana costs. which is nice because 0 is even, so like token decks can't really do like the block, like, and just shutting down like half the cards in someone's deck is good. And if someone's playing Garuda, they just straight up cry. Sorceries, we don't have a lot because we're colorless. All this does our main sorcery. One, because we can cascade off of it, and it makes each player sacrifice all colored permanents he or she controls. Guess what? We have no colored permanents, so no worries. Environmental sciences. Search a deck for basic. Put in your hand, gain 2 life. Just thins the deck. We also hit our land drop, so it's fine. Introduction to Annihilation. Really one of the only removal like spells. Like I guess like it's removal. Exile target non-land permanent. Its controller can draw a card. Doesn't matter. That's really it. Just exile something. And then our final sorcery is Introduction to Prophecy. It's just scry 2, draw a card. Basically make sure that we're hitting land drops early game. Make sure we're getting our rocks early game. Our instance, not of this world, I really like the idea of. Counter target spell or ability that targets a permanent you control, but not of this world costs 7 less to cast if it targets a permanent or ability. Sorry, if it targets a spell or ability that targets a creature you control, power 7 or greater. And it just so happens that Zhul is a 7/4. So if we play Zhul and someone tries to kill him, we can just instant speed, play Not of This World, and then cascade twice and still keep Zhul alive. Because again, we need Zhul. Scour from Existence, and we do that for free too. Scour from Existence, 7 mana, exile target permanent. It's an instant for, it's honestly not even that bad. Spatial Contortion is a kind of cool card I like. Target creature gets +3, -3 until end of turn. We only really care about that -3 effect just to, kill a creature. It's basically just like a weird lightning bolt in a way. And then Titan's Presence is very cool. As an additional cost to Titan's Presence, reveal a colorless creature card from our hand, and then exile target creature if its power is less to or equal to the revealed card's power. Guess what, guys? We have a lot of big guys, so most likely this is just 3 mana exile a creature. Going into artifacts, we have Basalt Monolith. It's just really good. Basalt Monolith, 3 mana. It doesn't untap during our untap step, but it does tap for 3. So it's essentially a free artifact right off the bat. And we can pay 3 mana to untap it. I like this because we could play it turn 3 and then play land and then have 7 mana by turn 4, which is a pretty big deal. Then we have Bitterthorn, Nissa's Animus. I really, really like this card. It's a 3 mana. It comes in as a 0/0, but it gets +1/+1, so it's a 1/1. Whenever equipped creature attacks, you may search your library for a basic land card and put it onto the battlefield. I like this card a lot just because it's not a deal combat damage trigger. It's an attack trigger, which is nice because even if we have no good attacks, we're still getting that land. Commander's Plate is nice because it's a 1 mana. Equipped creature gets +3/+3 and has protection from each color that's not in your commander's identity. A cool thing about being colorless is we have no colors in our commander identity, so it gets protection from each color. Dreamstone Hedron, 6 mana. You add 3, and then we can pay 3, sacrifice it, draw 3 cards. I like the idea of cascading into it. Also, just hard casting, it's still fine. Expedition Map, I like the idea of, we have a lot of non-basic lands in this deck just because we're colorless, and we really can for no detriment. But we can pay 2, sacrifice it, search our library for a land card, reveal it, and then put it into our hand. Spoiler alert, obviously we have Tron lands. We have Scavenger Grounds to deal with exiling graves, so it's kind of whatever we really need to get done, we probably have some kind of ability like that on a land. So it's fine. Forsaken Monument is a great card. 5 mana, legendary artifact. Colorless creatures you control get +2/+2, so it buffs our board. Whenever you tap a permanent for colorless, which is all we can really do, add an additional colorless, so it doubles our mana. Whenever you cast a colorless spell, gain 2 life to keep us alive when we take hits early game. Gilded Lotus, we get 3 mana of any color. We don't care what color it is, it's just we just get 3 mana. Hedron Archive, 4 mana, taps for 2. And then we can, sacrifice it to draw 2 cards later. Cauldron Complete is really cool. Just because it's a 7 mana, so it's going to cascade. The equipment itself is indestructible. But when it enters, it's a indestructible 5/5 with First Strike, Trample, Haste, and whenever it deals damage to a creature, combat damage to a creature, you just exile that creature. So this guy is just keyword soup. So we have Lightning Greaves. A quick creature has haste and shroud, has equipped 0. Ideally, we just kind of want to play it early game and then put it on Zhul whenever we cast him. Or if we play like a big Eldrazi Titan, we can give him haste and then start annihilating. Or we give it to Blight with Steel or whatever. Mindstone, just 2 mana, taps for a colorless. We can sacrifice it, draw a card. Sounds good. Moonsilver Key, it's kind of cool just because it's 2 mana, pay 1, sacrifice it, you know, whatever. Search your library for an artifact card with mana ability or basic land card, reveal it, and then put it into your hand. So we either just get a basic, which is fine, or we search our deck for really any mana rock or any artifact that has like a mana ability. We could even get like Palladium Mirror or really whatever I think is good. Mystic Forge is cool. We can look at the top card of our library anytime. We may cast artifacts and colorless spells from the top of our library. So really everything but lands and instants and sorceries in our deck because we have no enchantments. Pay 1 life and tap it, exile the top card of our library. So if we have like a land on top and we don't really want it, we can at least get rid of it and try again. Portal to Phyrexia, 9 mana, enters the battlefield. Each opponent sacrifices 3 creatures, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So, 1, it's basically just a pseudo board wipe that doesn't affect us, and then we just reanimate a creature every single turn from anyone's graveyard. That sounds kind of cool. Pristine Talisman, it's 3 mana, it taps for a colorless, and then we can also just gain a life when we do it, so it's fine. Just the idea is like we're probably going to take beats early game, so just gaining life when we can is good. Quicksilver Amulet, kind of the alternative Zhul plan. 4 mana, pay 4 mana, tap it. You may put a creature card from your hand on the battlefield. So turn 5, we can just start whipping in Eldrazi Titans or Blight Steels or whatever. Realmbreaker, I really like the idea of. Realmbreaker has a 10 ability and tap it. Don't look at it, doesn't matter. We have no Praetors. The more important ability is the pay 2, tap it. Target opponent mills 3 cards, and you may put a land card from their graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, and if it leaves, it gets exiled. But I like the idea of being able to pay 2 mana, like maybe not every turn, but just like on, if we have extra mana on like an end step or whatever, just be like, oh yeah, like we'll mill you 3 and like we'll ramp 1. It's just repeatable land ramp. And most decks have at least 30 something lands. So the idea that like you're milling 3, like you're almost always going to hit a land. Like statistically, you'll hit a land. Sculpting Steel, it just enters the battlefield as a copy of anything we like. So if we have like a big artifact, or anyone has a big artifact really that we like, we just have that artifact now. Semblance Animal is nice. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a non-land card from our hand. Spells you cast share a card type with that card, cost 2 less. Ideally, we get rid of an artifact creature, so then our artifacts and our creatures cost 2 less. But really, whatever, you can't really go wrong. I think ideally getting creatures costing 2 less is better. But I mean, they all have their own thing. Soul Ring, it's just a net positive mana rock. Spine of Ishot, 7 mana. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent. We're going to cascade off that, and then when it is put into a graveyard, just return it to our hand. Neat. Swiftfoot Boots, same thing as Greaves, really just give Zhul protection as soon as we can, and then if we want to give like a Blade Steel or an Eldrazi Titan with Annihilator, like haste, they have it. Mugstone Meekstone's cool. It's 5 mana, and we choose one. We're either going to draw 2 cards, or we're going to kill a creature. Probably just kill the creature. But it's going to tap for 2 mana only to cast artifact spells, which is fine because we have like 26 artifacts. Not including creatures, we have 26 artifacts. And then Thought Vessel, no max hand size, just tap it for a colorless. Sounds good. Final artifacts are Thran Dynamo. It's 4 mana, and it taps for 3, which is great. And then Urza's Incubator, 3 mana. We're going to name Eldrazi just because we have the most Eldrazi. And creature spell, and basically Eldrazi's cost 2 less. So ideally we can start whipping out Zhul early game 2, like on turn 4. Going into lands, Ancient Tomb, it's such an expensive card. It's like $75, but the fact that it like gives us 2 mana on an untapped land is so important for Eldrazi. Like we kind of need it. Bonder's Enclave, pay 3, draw a card, activate it only if you have a creature with power 4 or greater, which we're big mana. Like I don't think any of our creatures like that aren't like mana specific creatures don't have power 4 or greater. Cavern of Souls, we're gonna say Eldrazi. Just our Eldrazi are uncounterable. That's really it, just because we need Zhul to stick around. Command Beacon, we're gonna sacrifice it to put Zhul from our command zone into our hand. Like if Zhul dies twice, he's almost uncastable for the most part. So we want to be able to just whip him back in and cast him for an easy 6. Crystal Grotto, we can filter it if we want, but we're just really there to scry one. Crystal Vein is nice because it taps for a colorless, or we can sacrifice it to add 2 colorless as a one-time use. Eldrazi Temple is great because we can tap it for 2 mana to only cast Eldrazi spells or activate Eldrazi abilities. But again, just having Zhul come in earlier is just so much better. Eye of Ugin, colorless eldrazi spells cost 2 less to cast. Again, we just straight up get Zhul in faster. And then we can pay 7 mana to search our library for a colorless creature card and then just put it into our hand. So really cool. Field of the Dead I like a lot in this deck, just because 1, we have so many non-basics, we're always going to get it like once we get to 7. And 2, like just the zombies, this being like just as blockers, because our big issue, like I said earlier, is aggro decks. It's also kind of go wide decks. Like if someone attacks us with too many creatures, like we don't really have the capacity to deal with it super well. So making 2/2s really helps. Homeward Path, kind of a psycho reason for this, but if someone like steals one of our creatures in some way, if someone takes like one of our big eldrazi somehow, or someone like mills us a little bit, they don't hit a Titan, and like they're able to reanimate like another big eldrazi or something, we want that back. We don't want them to have it, so that's kind of why it's there. Majoring Network is cool because we can put storage counters on it and then just remove any number of storage counters from it to just get a bunch of colorless. So early game it doesn't do much, but I mean as it builds up over time you can get like a ton of mana. Myriad Landscape, it's kind of alright. I mean it's just pay 2, sacrifice it, search your deck for 2 basic lands, 2 wastes, and then put them on the battlefield. So it's kind of ramp, but eh. Class of Heroes is great just because we can exile it and to give a legendary creature hexproof and indestructible on the turn. Reliquary Tower gives us no max hand size, and Sanctum of Ugin's neat because whenever we cast a colorless spell with mana cost 7 or greater, we could sacrifice it, and if we do, search our library for a colorless creature card and then just put it into our hand. So it's kind of like a hard tutor later. Next we have Scavenger Grounds. Just 2 mana, sacrifice a desert, exile all cards from all graves, just to, you know, have a quick wipe clean. Shrine of the Forsaken God, taps for 2 mana, only for colorless spells and only if we have 7 or more lands. It's kind of weird, but that's still pretty good. Strip Mine, we just get rid of a land we don't like. Mycosynth Gardens, it's going to tap for, tap for colorless, we can filter if we want, and then we can pay X. Mycosynth becomes target of a non-token artifact we control with mana value X. So the idea is it's still a land, but I like the idea of just being able to be like, oh, we can like just make a copy of like say like 4 mana Thran Dynamo, right? Like now we have the Thran Dynamo on someone's end step, so we can get like net positive like mana for another turn. Treasure Vault, I like the idea of, maybe, I don't really know honestly, because the idea is cool because it's kind of like, again, on like the end step we can put a bunch of mana into it, get a bunch of treasures, and then just like it could make us net positive in a way. But I don't know, I'm iffy about it. Urza's Factory, it's not a great land. We can pay basically 7 mana, but really 8 mana because we have to lose the land anyways, to create a 2/2 assembly worker. But the more important thing is that it's an Urza's land, which I'll talk about right now. We have all the Tron lands. Basically what they do is they all say if you have the other one, this one taps for more. So if you control, they all tap for a colorless, but Urza's Mine says, for example, if you control Urza's Mine, Tower, and Power Plant, you add 2 colorless to your mana pool instead of 1. Power Plant says the same thing for Mine and Tower says if you control Power Plant and Mine, it taps for 3 instead. So you can get like basically 7 mana just from having these 3 guys on the field. And then finally, Urza's Workshop, which is why we run the other Urza's card. We can tap it for each Urza land we control. So this bad boy could come in and tap for 5 mana by himself potentially, which is cool. And then we have War Room, pay 3 mana, tap it, pay life equal to the number of colors in your commander's color identity. We have none, we just draw a card. And then finally we have Zhalfirin Void. Just when it enters, we scry 1. That's really it, just a little card advantage. And we run 10 waves for a total of 37 lands. The deck costs about $650, but again, like I said earlier, that price is going to go down like a good chunk just by seeing what gets reprinted in the new set. And the average CMC is 5.65, which is crazy high, but we're a big mana deck, and when we care about the mana cost being 7 a lot, it's kind of like, what do you expect? You know, like, so that's a high mana cost, but we have enough rocks and land to really make it happen. Thanks for watching, guys. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment what you want me to do next. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.